Hello everybody. Today I've got the Mossberg 715P chambered in 22LR. Please don't forget to check out our website. Go to our affiliates page. You'll find discount codes for things like Mantis Axe and Core belts, linked to that cool little bore light that we use for lighting up the barrels. Use those links. It will often save you money, never will cost you any additional money, and helps the channel. Thank you. This particular gun, I was out on the prowl traveling through the various gun stores, and I stumbled across it and thought it looked interesting, thought it looked kind of cool, so I decided I would pick one up. So I'm going to pull the magazine out, which that in and of itself is something we'll be talking about, and it's loaded with dummy rounds. So these are snap caps basically to protect the firing pin when I fire it. So there's no live ammo here, and of course there's nothing in the chamber. So basically what this is an AR looking or an AR style pistol chambered in 22LR. The AR part of it is just superficial. It's really just a plastic housing that kind of shaped like an AR. Really doesn't have any AR features. It has a crossbolt safety. So that's the fire position. You can see the red. And then if you push it the other way, it's safe. And that's not surprising. Mossberg really kind of does the crossbolt safeties in a lot of different things. And that safety works. I had no problem with it at all. It's easy enough to get to with your finger. To put it back on safe, you'd use the other hand. And it's somewhat ambidextrous in that you can operate it with either hand, but you can't take the safety off, obviously, with the left hand. It has to be done with the right hand. So the safety is biased towards a right-handed shooter to be able to put it onto fire position. The magazine release is this lever. But part of the problem with this magazine release is internally this is basically a 702 Plinkster chassis. And it has a little hook on it that you push forward to release the magazine. In order to get the AR style look for it, this is basically an oblong cam that when you push down on it, pushes forward on that. It really doesn't work all that well. So I'm going to put the magazine in, and it will not drop free. And even when you do end up pushing down on it, you almost end up having to grab the gun from the side and push down on it and yank. When I first got the thing, the magazine wouldn't come out at all. So I ended up having to spend some time, probably about 100 in and outs, just jamming the magazine in and out and getting little shavings of metal and plastic until finally it actually got to the point where I can put the magazine in and take it out reasonably well. But it's nothing you're going to do quickly. So I'm not sure how long that will last, because being a plastic cam pushing up against a metal piece, and you have to push down pretty forcefully in order to get it to work. So this is a mechanism that I wouldn't necessarily expect to have a long longevity. And that's one of the things about this. So let's talk about the positives of this. It's cool looking. It comes with this UTG red dot. And of course the camera's going to make the dot look horrible because cameras hate red dots. But it's actually quite a nice little red dot. And you can do red like I have here, or you can do green. And all I'm doing is turning the turret up here to the different brightness settings and colors that I want. And these little UTG optics are actually pretty good little optics for what you pay for them. It came with it. So this, what you're seeing here, is exactly what I took out of the box. I didn't add anything to this. So it does come complete, ready to go. It comes with one of these 25 round magazines. And this little optic worked great. It pulled, the gun functioned well. It shot everything that I put through it. It ran flawlessly at the range, and it actually pulled nice tight groups. It was easy to pull tight groups with it. The first group I pulled was low, so I needed to adjust this a little bit. And it's got you just remove these, and then there's screws underneath it, so it's easy to adjust. But overall, I kind of like the optic more than I ended up liking the gun from a overall, I believe, reliability standpoint. I've had these UTGs on things before, and they've held up pretty well, whether it was a red dot or a scope, and they're not overly expensive. Once I adjusted it, it was pretty much dead on and pulling nice type groups. It ran reliably, it ran smooth. I've got the snap caps in here for a reason. I want to show you the trigger. And of course you don't dry fire a 22. So make sure I picked one up. Yep, it did. So the trigger's got a little bit of take up. It's super, super light take up. And then kind of a longish but very light and very smooth break. There's the reset, and you're right on the wall other than there's some take-up to get back to it. So I said you were red on the wall. You really weren't. There was some actual take-up to get back to it. But overall, it had a nice trigger. And when shooting it at the range, the trigger did contribute to it being relatively easy to pull nice grips with it. I'm going to get these snap caps out of here. Now, one thing I did have an issue with the magazine, the way this magazine is designed is it's basically a 10-round magazine that's then's got an extension on it. And that's what this plastic housing is. So there's a spring up here, and then there's a spring down here. And there's this little takeoff lever. You can see the two springs. This little takedown lever that takes the tension off it. And that works great for about the first 10 rounds. As you're loading this, once you pull the tension off it, that actually gets very soft, and you can put about 10 rounds in there. As soon as it tries to make this turn, though, it'll start to stick. So they did provide with it a little loader mechanism. And it's this little plastic thing, and you're going to need it to load it. Unless the magazine you get, it works a little bit smoother. But from what I've read, this magazine, it's typical that it doesn't work all that smooth. And you're going to need to load this, use this to get past, let's say, 10 or 15 rounds. Once you do that, you can load it up to the 25 rounds. And it's got a little bit of a follower that you can see that's red. Which, well, when the follower actually comes down. I'm probably not going to be able to get the follower to come down, but the follower is red, and you can actually see in these holes as it comes down and goes back up again, you'll see some red in there. But when it's actually got a round in that position, you'll see the round. You'll see the brass through there. So the magazines are kind of cool, other than they're a little bit clunky to use or clunky to load and unload. But they were reliable. So despite the weirdness trying to get it loaded, it didn't malfunction at a particular round level. It just ran. Did not have a single malfunction with this while running it. It just ran. So now you can see up front, it's got some Picatinny rails, kind of a quad rail. They're polymer, so they're not going to beat your hands up. Like the aluminum ones are a little bit more robust, but they tend to be uncomfortable to hold. It's got a regular AR style flash hider. Does look like it's threaded. I'm not going to test that, and I'm not going to put a suppressor on this. It's got a rail on the top. It has a front post sight that's all integrated, and the sights that come with it are predominantly polymer. It does have a metal post, but if I didn't have the optic on it, there is a version of this that comes without an optic, with or without. If the optic were off it, at least it does come ready to go with sights that you can use right out of the box. And then at the back, you also have kind of a little peep sight that is adjustable height and windage. And this little charging handle thing is actually fake. It's just decoration. The charging handle is over here on the side right here. And this charging handle is metal. Now the majority of what you see here is polymer. This whole housing really is just a plastic housing. So effectively what's in here is there's a 702 Plinkster mechanism that's inside of this housing. This housing really doesn't do anything other than hold on to that 702 Plinkster type mechanism. And that's one of the other problems with this gun, is in order to clean this, just basic maintenance, you have to take it out of this housing. And the way you do that is remove a dozen screws. Here, up under here. So you got to take the sights off. You have to take the optic off if you have an optic on it. So any chance of holding zero is kind of low because it's a polymer rail. So once you take this optic off and put it back on, the chance of it being perfectly lined up again is kind of low. So you may end up having to adjust it every time you clean it. There's screw here and here, here. And these are all those coarse thread screws that are meant to go into little plastic pillars. So inside here there's little plastic columns. And so if you're not careful, it's easy to split those columns or wear those out. So you kind of need to be careful taking this apart. And then there's a hex under here. And then there's one right about in here, but you can't see it because it's inside the housing. You can't get to it till you take the housing apart. So it's a two-step process. You have to take this whole housing apart, and then you got to the mechanism, and then you take the mechanism apart by punching out two knurled pins. Now the problem with knurled pins is going into an aluminum, because the receiver in here is aluminum, is you punch them out and punch them back in, they're not going to line up perfect every time, so they're going to kind of cut new trails each time you do it. And over time, eventually you'll end up coring it out and those pins will get loose. The optic itself has a control on the top that allows you to set the brightness and the color. So red, or this is the off position, or green. It has a height adjustment and a windage adjustment, and basically you take these caps off, and they do thread kind of forever, but there's a screw under there, and you just adjust it with a regular screwdriver or an optic adjustment tool. And so the optic itself is actually fairly easy to live with. The battery is under this cover. It's a CR2032, so it's a really common battery. And once I put this thing back on, it came with these flip-up covers that allow you to protect the optics. So if you get the version that has the optic on it to begin with, then it's a pretty nice optic. So the MSRP on this one is $358, but I've seen these well under $300 in my travels. This one, they were having a sale. It was even cheaper than that. So I decided, I'm going to grab this because it just looks cool. It wasn't until I got it home and started doing some looking at it and started messing around with it that, in all honesty, I wouldn't buy this again. There's probably better guns out there, may not look as cool, but anything based on a 1022 mechanism. And you've got like the 1022 Charger as a pistol style, rifle-shaped pistol style 10 or 22 LR, much higher quality, much more reliable. This mechanism, I don't necessarily expect to have a long lifespan, and this housing, I kind of expect to have an even shorter lifespan. So this is probably the first Mossberg I've ever bought that I really didn't like, wouldn't recommend. Now, technically, it's not truly a Mossberg. It's Mossberg International. It's made in Brazil. In fact, I think it says it on one side over here. Oh, it's on the other side. Made in Brazil by CRC or CBC. There you go. And so it's technically not a Mossberg made in the United States, but I'm kind of thinking Mossberg shouldn't have put their name on this. This, if I never had a Mossberg before and I bought this and brought it home, it probably would be my first and last Mossberg. Now, I have had Mossbergs. I've had real Mossbergs. They're shotguns. They're stellar shotguns. They're MC2 series. They're pistol series. Wonderful guns. Reliable, easy to maintain. And then there's this thing. So if you're looking for something like this and you're willing to put up with all the nastiness I just described, okay, it'll probably hold up for a while, but there's lots of better options. This is the point in the video where I normally would take apart a gun so you can see how to take it apart and I can show you what the internals look like. I'm not going to do that with this. Number one, it'd be a half-hour video, and it would probably include some language that I don't normally include in our video, so it'd probably be one big continuous beep. I'm going to throw a picture up to show you the mess that was on the table when I had it apart, and keep in mind the only thing I was doing was taking it apart to clean it. I wasn't doing any sort of gunsmithing or any sort of enhancement to it, simply cleaning it. And you can see the mess, all the screws, the little screws, and the parts of the various components. Overall, not a well-designed gun, despite looking kind of cool. Beyond that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell to be notified if you do. Check us out on Facebook, Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, Getter, kind of everywhere. And thank you.
Heavy.